calming measures on Maxwell Street, and this was to help control some undesirable truck traffic that was being generated by the adjacent Green Life grocery. During this meeting earlier in August, a representative of the Green Life grocery committed to pursuing a development plan that would enable all of the large trucks that had been maneuvering on Maxwell Street to maneuver entirely within the Green Life property. And this would essentially preclude the need for any of the traffic calming measures. Council was favorable to this proposal and asked the applicant to pursue a conditional zoning application within a reasonable time frame so that these improvements could be initiated. The conditional zoning application would be required because any reconfiguration of the loading dock area that is generally located in this general vicinity would likely require the absorption of that piece of residentially zoned property. That property is currently zoned RM8, whereas the rest of the Green Life property is zoned Community Business 2. All of our conditional zoning applications are initiated with a pre-application conference, and this is a required step, so no applications are accepted until this conference takes place. During the conference, the relevant development proposal is discussed. Sometimes this is with the aid of a site plan, sometimes it's not. It's 50-50, what typically occurs. More often than not, a number of our city staff, our technical reviewers attend this conference. Sometimes all of the reviewers can attend the conference. And it's an opportunity to identify potential obstacles as well as potential opportunities with a particular development proposal. Additionally, the time during this conference is taken to discuss the specific application requirements because not all applications are created equally. Some require different permits. Some require additional information that's necessary to properly and fully evaluate a particular development proposal. We also discuss what can be expected from the public hearing process, both in terms of the technical and non-technical standards and the information that needs to be supplied to support those standards, but also the typical timelines that are associated with the conditional zoning project. Everybody always is interested in how long is this process typically going to take. A pre-application conference for the Green Life conditional zoning application was held on November 13th. And in attendance were representatives from the Green Life grocery as well as folks from city staff. And there's quite a bit of information that I could share about that pre-application conference, the specifics of that discussion. Some of that information was included in the staff report. So I'll just simply summarize by saying it was a perfectly typical pre-application conference. There was really nothing that was extraordinary about it. Instead, I think it's best to take some time to share with you the latest conceptual plan that has been produced by the landscape architects who have been engaged by Green Life to not just come up with a plan for reconfiguring the loading area, but to actually do a longer-term master plan. It's important that I emphasize that these are still very conceptual plans, and they are also very new. We just received them earlier this afternoon. I hadn't even had the opportunity to really look down and look at them very closely until later this afternoon. So this is all very brand new information. We haven't had the opportunity to share it with a larger audience before tonight. It's also our understanding that the property owners haven't had much time to consider the latest plans either, and so there's still some need for discussion between the owners and the representatives of Green Life. But just to go ahead and get to the plans, I'll just orient everybody. This is the existing site. This property here, this larger parcel that's outlined in this sort of darker red line, is the main Green Life property. That's the Green Life grocery as well. There's some of the patron parking area, some employee parking area. Also part of the Green Life lease area is the Green Life Community Center, and then there's a small parking field behind it. Of course, we've talked about the adjacent residential property that would needed to be absorbed in order to undertake this development proposal. And then lastly, the larger line or boundary is the property that is owned by the same owners who lease the land to the Green Life grocery. Green Life does not own the property that they occupy, they lease it. And the folks who do own the property own this larger area. And that's important to keep in mind, and I'll explain that as I go through the development proposal. It's a three-phase development plan. The first phase is the reconfiguration of the loading dock areas. The loading dock would move to this side of the building. Currently, it's sort of on this back side here. It would move to this sort of northern edge. This would close the loading the entrance to the loading dock area along Maxwell Street and would establish a 20-foot vegetated buffer. It would also necessitate the relocation of this existing single-family home, which is proposed to be located over here behind an existing multifamily structure. This is some of the property that is owned by the people who own the larger piece of property. So that should be feasible. The trucks, the large trucks, would no longer need to maneuver on Maxwell Street. They would come in on Merriman, come through the parking lot, punch through this opening here. Oh, excuse me. They would punch through, point down towards the Green Life Community Center here, and then maneuver and back into that loading dock. That loading dock is large enough to accommodate two large tractor trailers. And additionally, there is space on the property for a third trailer to stage, or a third truck, rather. Small trucks also would be able to come through the same entrance, do a similar, slightly different maneuver. They could head onto Maxwell. They would still need to access Maxwell, but it would be for a very small distance. It would just be between this entrance exit here to the same existing loading area for that smaller dock. And then they could exit much the same way. They could come out through this property. Oh, excuse me. The exit's on this side, sorry. The only drawback to this development plan that I can identify is that normally, if we were to conditionally rezone this piece of property to a commercial designation, our new landscape standards now establish vegetated buffers between dissimilar zoning districts. So we would normally require a 30-foot vegetated buffer between this parcel and these adjacent single-family homes. Green Life would request, in order to have the maneuvering room that they require for the trucks and also to provide a small amount of parking that gets lost with this reconfiguration, it would necessitate the narrowing of that required buffer from 30 feet to approximately, I don't know if that's 5 to 10 feet with an opaque privacy fence. This property, this is part of why I wanted to point out, this is some of that larger piece of property. So the buffer would be against the folks who own this larger property. So their approval would be garnered at the beginning of this process. So it wouldn't be something that they would be hit with after the fact. Phase 2 focuses on the construction of a new parking deck. This is a 2-story parking deck. The most efficient way to build these parking structures is to take advantage of the topography of the site and not have the 2 levels access internally. So the proposal is to do a small amount of grading to kind of raise the elevation on this end. They can do some. They're not exactly sure how high they can get it, but the goal is to get it as close to the finished floor of this structure that they can, in order for that to be relatively on grade with the building so that it would appear to be just sort of a surface parking lot. And then you would access that from what appears to be sort of an extension of Bordeaux. The lower level would be accessed internally from the existing surface lot. This parking structure, it does remove some of the existing parking, but it adds 133 spaces. I haven't been able to do the analysis to understand what the total net gain is, but it would be overbuilt for what this site currently requires. And that is because Phase 3 includes an addition. So this is a building addition. This portion of the property is more on grade with the existing finished floor, so it's the most appropriate place to put the building addition. It also includes a pedestrian mall area and some other landscape enhancements. The structure would remain the same in Phase 2. The loading dock area remains exactly the same from the beginning to the end. I think that pretty much, well, I guess I can just point out here, the landscape architects did also do a section through the property here, looking west, and this is that section elevation. It kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at. This is Marsalis. You can see some of the elevation changes, the 2 stories of the parking structure. Would go across the plaza area, across the existing parking lot, across the multifamily piece of property onto the Green Life Community Center property, so going south to north. The Green Life building would be located behind this structure. The multifamily structure in the community center would be located in front of that elevation. So to close, it appears that there's been a substantial good faith effort by the representatives of Green Life to develop the concept plans, to prepare them for an application. No application has been made at this time, but this is very typical of a conditional zoning process, and this is what we would expect to see at this point. And that concludes my
Thank you, Ms.
summary.
Tuck. Any members of the community wishing to address council on this matter this evening? Yes, sir.